Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's really great to see so many people here for a webinar about plants and citizen science. And I'm really excited to get into this conversation. As some of you, I'm sure, will know, we've been doing this webinar series for a couple of years now. We used to, at one point, pre-pandemic, have public talks in our Bangalore office, but I guess one of the few good things that came out of this entire thing was that we got to interact with so many people online through a bunch of great webinars, including the one we're doing today. So very excited to speak to Sayee today about, season watch and plants and botany. So a very warm welcome to Sayee and everybody else who's here for this webinar. It's really great to see so many people tuned in. Let me quickly introduce Sayee to all of you. She holds a master's in botany from Savitribai Phule Pune University. She's previously worked with Karnataka State Biodiversity Board, and she's done so much interesting stuff with trees previously. And even now, outside of her job, she really likes tree walks and birding, and she's just such an enthusiastic and fun person to talk to. And all her love for plants has now led her to working with SeasonWatch, and she also helps them a lot with their outreach and communications. And you'll, of course, learn a lot more about SeasonWatch during the course of this webinar. So welcome, Sayee. It's lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ishika. That's a really nice intro. Thanks everyone for joining, and I really hope that you have a good time. And please, it's going to be interactive, so please type in your answers in the chat box. We unfortunately cannot talk in person or even unmute ourselves and talk, but chat box is open for all the talking. So please get talking about plants when we start the session.
Absolutely, yes. Please do interact. And so before we get into the technicalities of SeasonWatch and how to use the platform, I really want to know a little bit more about what draws you towards botany and towards trees that we find all around us. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. When did this interest first emerge, and what have you done since then to kind of keep that alive and keep engaging with it?
Right. Okay. So actually, I was really never drawn to plants, honestly. After my 12th, I actually wanted to be a doctor, but I ended up doing BSc from Ruia College of Mumbai. And when I was taking the admission, I thought I'll take chemistry because I've studied chemistry, zoology because I like animals, and botany maybe I'll try to study and drop after 1 year because I'm not very good at botany, neither do I want to pursue it. And I thought, okay, let's go ahead with CBZ, the combination that I took. But fate had it that in my second semester, we were taught about plant families, and the person who taught me these families, Dr. Bhavna Narula, she herself is so in love with plants that it was impossible to sit in her class and not start being fascinated by plants themselves. So I think the sole reason I am into botany is this person and the whole botany department of Ruia College. So I strongly believe that if you want to love something, you need to be shown how to do that. And if you find such a person, if you're lucky enough to find such a person in life, I think that's it. Then you will never not love this subject or these organisms or anything that you choose. And when I was doing my bachelor's, that time our department also used to take us to these walks, tree walks nearby. That's when I got introduced to the idea of tree walks, or just looking at plants while you walk, no matter where you are. Every walk is tree walk once you start looking at plants. And so since that started happening, I was like, I never want to not do this in my life. And then I just chose to do things that allowed me to do this and also got a bit of money out of it. And that's how I stayed in touch with the subject. And I'm having, like I said, the most fun combining all of these things, studying about plants, monitoring them, observing them, and talking about them to people who want to know about them, or even who don't want to know about them sometimes. Sorry. And yeah, so that's my journey so far.
Thanks for sharing. I think it's also really nice to know that it doesn't always have to be so consistent, your interest in something, but it's lovely that you had the opportunity to kind of revisit that and I think you also just brought out how important it is to have some good educators and people to
Yeah,
encourage you. And because I feel like definitely a lot of what happens in colleges and when people even who choose to study botany, sometimes if it's taught in a boring way, you don't want to continue doing it, even though it's so fascinating.
yeah,
And like you're saying, given that they're easy to observe and they're all around us, and but still, most people spend their time observing or getting to know maybe birds or insects instead. And of course, they're moving and they're animated perhaps in some ways. But I
yeah.
mean, of course, there's so much more to what's happening with plants as well. So, but what do you think is the reason for why plants are often overlooked? And what is a good way for people to start taking notice of the plants around them? And how does one inculcate that interest in themselves?
Right. So I came across this very interesting article recently, which talks about plant blindness and how we developed it to save our brains from overburdening with information. So, like you said, plants are everywhere, and if we observed and noticed every detail around us, our brains would get fried. And so we started filtering out that information, and now we've ended up into this stage where we just don't look at plants or don't know anything about them, or mostly don't know about most of the plants around us. We only know what we eat or use commonly, and so on. So I believe that it's already in us to look at plants and to connect with them naturally. What we really need is to get a bit of nudge into the world as to what to look at basically, and how to go about observing it or understanding or analyzing the information that we collect when we observe plants. And not just because I work with Season Watch, but I believe even when I was not working with Season Watch, I was using the app, and I realized that it's a great tool to do something with plants. I mean, when we look at birds, they move, so they give us a lot of content that way. But plants is all our work. We have to look in different places, and we have to develop a vision for them. So Season Watch gives you a way of doing an activity with plants. So that's what I really like about the project, and it's very simple. Like anybody from school to anybody who's interested in plants can do it very easily, just around their houses. You don't even have to go to a forest or anything. So I think that's what we need, to open our minds a bit and to have some base or interest, and then pursuing it in simple possible ways, and then do this different activities, not just Season Watch. I'm not here to only promote Season Watch, but find something that interests you. For example, even if you observe a tree and say look at all animals that visit the tree, and study what they do with respect to the tree, or how tree is reacting to this kind of interaction, or how it changes over the day or over the month or year, whatever you choose to do. So something like that, if we take up, I think we would connect much better with the trees. And it's really not that difficult. You just need to. I mean, when we talk about it today, I think most people would understand that we already know a lot about trees. It's just that we don't talk about it, and we feel we don't know. That's all there is, I feel.
That's so true. Yeah. Thanks so much for that context. And I know that, on that note, I think you have a very interesting presentation for us. So I'll hand it over to you now and let you take the lead for a while and tell us all about the trees around us and Season Watch, of course. And I'll keep an eye on the chat box for you. So everyone in the audience, like we said earlier, it's open. Please feel free to type out your answers, responses. We'll keep this interactive and yeah, join in the conversation as we go along. So over to you.
Yeah, I'll just start sharing my screen.
Yes.
All right. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Ishika, for coming up with this amazing name. I really like it. And so today we're going to talk about trees, the different ways they react to seasons, and then how do we track these changes to understand the impact of climate change. That is the basis of the whole talk, but it's not going to be as boring as I just put it, I hope. Let's begin with talking about what are trees, or what do we think or come up with when we hear the word trees. You can type in your answers in the chat box. I mean, what are trees to us personally, or what do we think of trees? How do we feel about trees? Anything that comes to your mind when you hear Large plants with woody tissues, amazing. That's a really nice botanical answer, I would say, for trees. Thank you for that, Jayant. Plants that grow above a certain height, very nice. A universe within itself, that's so beautiful. Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Urvi. I love that answer. Anybody else? Anything like green, leaf, very nice. Samira, thank you. Trees to me are history and heritage, wonderful. Shade and peace, beautiful. Trees for me are a symbol of steadiness and warmth. I completely agree. That's lovely. Thank you so much for these answers. So trees are basically these organisms that are essentially rooted in one place, and they're large. They provide a lot of shade. They have a large canopy. They also cool the environment around us. They have a lot of leaves. They support a lot of life around us, including our own lives. And they're basically everywhere around us, and they're very important to have around us. So I think we would all agree on these points. And then we have interacted with trees in many ways, especially in our childhood. So I would really like for you to go back in your memories and tell some stories or instances of the trees that you remember from your childhood. It's okay if you don't remember the names, but some interaction that you had or a tree friend that you had from your childhood would be great. Again, type your answers in the chat box, please. For me, I think climbing trees is still one of the best things you can do. And I still cannot climb trees, but I would really like to be able to do that someday. And there was one tree in my grandparents' house. It was a guava tree. I knew because it grew guavas. That's the only reason I knew. And I used to hang around that tree a lot. Stunted custard apple tea that we used to steal fruit from. Yes, stealing fruits I think is a pretty uniform interaction that most of us have had with trees in our childhood, especially. Any other stories you would like to share? Anybody would like to share?
There's
Mango
Chad who
tree.
said swinging from the hanging roots of a banyan.
Oh, right. Yes,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Bougainvillea full bloom with magenta flowers. Yes, Shikha. Thanks for that memory. Baobab tree every season while in school. That's so lucky. I only saw baobabs when I shifted to Mumbai when I was in school, and we have these two huge baobabs in the Rani Chi Bagh, a famous zoo and botanical garden in Mumbai. So that's when I got introduced to baobabs. But so nice to have a childhood memory with it. Guava tree was our cousin's meeting point. That's beautiful, amazing. Yeah, anybody remembers places or roads according to trees? Like you remember the trees on a road, and then you tell people to come by this tree, and that's where you'll find this and that. So using trees as landmarks, basically. Yeah, so basically, even if we don't know the names of trees, we still have a lot of memories of eating the fruits, climbing them, plucking leaves also for that matter, swinging from the hanging roots, and so on. So we have this connection with trees, which sort of we grow out of as we grow up. And what we hope to do now is to grow back down and again connect with trees in different ways, even if it's to just climb and swing on their roots. It's all good. And finally, coming to this point, that I mean, one reason why we don't interact with trees is because we don't know the names. But can you think of some trees that you know the names of? Again, you can type your answers in the chat box. Golden shower during spring is a nice answer, Shikha. Gulmohar, neem, ficus, copperpot, flame tree, golden shower. Very nice. Right. So the thing is, we do know some trees around us, and we just discard them, or don't think it a big deal because they're like very common trees that everyone might know. But that's still tree knowledge, right? That still keeps you connected with the trees, and that still means that you know or have some connection with trees. So let me just talk about some common trees that are found around us, especially in cities. One is Pongam tree. Do you have this tree around you, and are you familiar with these pink flowers? A very nice leafy, shady canopy, and a round, beautiful tree, and identified by a dark brown bark, and the leaflets are always 5 to 7 with one single leaflet jutting out. and it flowers into pink clusters seasonally. And the pods, then the flowers give way to the pods and they're flat and hard. So if we are to look at trees, we observe these various features as to how tall it is firstly, how broad the trunk is, how the leaves are, or do the leaves stay on the tree throughout the year, or do the tree turns leafless in some of the seasons, or when do they have flowers, when do they have fruits, and so on. So some other trees that are very known to us or quite common around us is rosy trumpet trees and the African tulip trees. So the rosy trumpet is often mistaken as cherry blossom. Many people have described it as cherry blossom in India. And although it does look like it, I wish it was actually cherry blossom. And African tulip, do you know this little game that kids do with the African tulip with its flower buds, especially? It's called pitchkari or squirt tree. Also because of this property that if you squeeze the flower buds, it squirts out water. And I've seen a lot of kids play with those flower buds, and it's quite fun to do it. Yes, Rosy
Ah,
Trumpet in Eastern Express Highway of Mumbai is quite famous. Yeah. Thanks for that input, Shikha. Do you know any locations of the African tulip in Mumbai? It's not as common in Mumbai as it is in Bangalore. And then maybe some other commentaries around us are Jakaranda. People in all cities across India would have seen these purple flowers that come in late summer. And in places like Mumbai, which are closer to the coast and not at a very high elevation, they do not flower very well. But in cities like Pune and even Bangalore, they flower and fruit quite commonly. Jacaranda is not the state flower of Maharashtra. It's called Pride of India, or Tamhan is a Marathi name for the state flower. But yeah, you're right. The flowers do look purple. I mean, they're both purple in Jacaranda as well as Tamhan or Pride of India tree. And these, I'm sure you might have heard of these two invasive plants called lantana and mesquite. Or mesquite has a lot of names like Jali Marie in Kannada, or names that suggest that it's a bad tree, a bad acacia, a bad babul, and so on. And both of these trees were brought by the Britishers. No problem, Shikha. Thank you for taking it so well. So they were brought by Britishers, and now they're everywhere around us. And I'm sure you might have heard of the idea of native trees and exotic trees and invasive. Yes, Samira, lantana and even mesquite or Prosopis juliflora, as it's commonly known as. I think after mango, this is the most common or well-known scientific name for a tree. It's because they both are so destructive in their ways and the way they have altered the different landscapes in India, that they're pretty infamous that way. So one thing to remember is to not plant them purposely anywhere. And there are a lot of efforts taken by different organizations as well as the government to remove these from our landscapes, because they're destroying and taking up space that is rightfully of the native species, the species that make up a natural habitat. And Shri Krishna says mesquite is the first indication of desertification. That's right. That's because mesquite comes in very degraded lands very easily. So when that's happening, we know that the landscape is changing and is devoid of water, and only this species is able to grow there now. So these are some trees that are known, and because of their seasonal patterns, it's also a good indicator of how our seasons are changing. So they produce flowers and fruits in particular seasons, and if that timing of flowers and fruits coming on the tree changes, that tells us something about how our weather or season are changing. So coming to what do you notice in trees? For example, if you look at a tree and you are meant to identify it, what all do you notice, or what is the first thing maybe that you notice? Is it the height of the tree? Is it the form, how the branches are, or how the canopy is shaped? Or is it the flowers and the fruits, the foliage? Its size, leaf or flowers, very nice. Shape and form, amazing. How about fruits, and also whether it has any hanging roots? The fact that I don't know its name is first thing that you notice, all right. Fair enough, that's very realistic. Buttresses, yes. Leaf design. These are all great answers, and these are what help us identify a tree. So, we usually do this almost 3 hours workshop wherein we give an introduction and different ways of identifying plants to begin identifying plants basically. So please stay in touch with Season Watch if you would like to attend this workshop. We do it twice a year because it's very hectic to organize and execute these workshops. But I hope most of you would like to join, and they're free of cost, of course. Every outreach that we do is free of cost. So please stay in touch and do join these workshops. So different things that you just mentioned: the leaves, flowers, fruits, buttresses, bark, form, height, shape, all of these are the different things that we notice in trees. And most prominently, I think we notice plants for their flowers or their fruits, because that's the eye-catching feature of plants. So, but again, they're not available throughout the year. They only come sometimes a year. So although flowers are called signatures of trees, you can very easily identify a tree based on the flowers. It's not permanent, or it keeps changing. So you also need other factors like the leaves or the bark of the tree, or even the branching pattern in some cases, to be able to identify trees. Now, coming to these seasonal changes, like we've been mentioning for a time now, that trees and seasons go hand in hand. So the moment a season starts changing, the first sign, even before we decide whether or not we want to wear a sweater not anymore, the trees have already indicated what season has come. For example, end of winter and early spring will always be indicated by these beautiful flowering that will begin. Spring is the king of the seasons, they say, and most of the trees will be flowering during this period, and it's a very active sort of period for the trees. So seasons, they reflect beautifully and very, very reliably understand changes in season. In fact, it's so intricate that earlier, when there were no calendars, which is very, very long ago, people used to rely on the changing phenology or changing forms of trees. Whether they have leaves, new leaves, or the leaves are shed off, or there are flowers, or there are fruits, to recognize which festival to celebrate, and that's how the year was mapped. So trees have always been our go-to understand the seasonal changes. And what better to talk about than the cherry blossom festival in Japan when it comes to seasons and culture and trees. So people in Japan have always recognized that cherry trees are very, very essential, not just for the nature, for the ecology there, but also for the economy, because the tourism is in a boom when the cherry trees blossom. And also well, culturally, so a lot of festivals that they celebrate are dependent on the cherry blossom. And so they have monitored these trees for long, for about 1200 years. And what they monitored was just the peak date on which the cherry blossom will be in peak bloom. So all the trees throughout the country will have that maximum blossoming, maximum flowering. So that's the date that was noted, and all of this data was compiled and it was plotted into this very simple looking graph. So what it tells us is from 800 to 1800s, the peak of cherry blossom fell between 10th and 20th of April, almost every year. Yeah, it kept changing, but it still remained in this window. But after 1800s, which is when the Industrial Revolution started and the global warming effectively began happening, and the pollution levels increased and climate change started dawning upon us, you see that the graph comes lower, which means the cherry blossom have started blooming earlier. The peak is coming earlier than its designated window for all these years. And it started happening between 1st and 10th April during the 2000 to 2016 sort of period. And that tells us that the season has started changing earlier, and the peak of summer is happening, or peak of this blossoming is happening earlier than usual. And that is a very good indication that our seasons are not as they were experienced by our ancestors, and that is changing because of climate change. Yeah, and if you notice the change here, it's just about 5 to 8 days. So here it's happening around on 5th of April to 8th or 10th of April. So that is just 5 to 8 days of difference. And for human life, which is many years and which is not solely dependent on cherry blossom, it's not a big deal. But imagine small animals. Imagine you were a bee or a butterfly that depended entirely on this cherry blossom. That is going to be super confused, and the life, it's like life and death situation for these animals. If the trees are changing so drastically, and if the trees are changing and these animals are changing, the entire food web is going to change. And there's another data that shows that. But before that, there's one more information that people collected in the USA, and they're still collecting, and they will continue to do that, to understand how the seasons are arriving in different parts of the continent. So this is the National Phenology Network, the USA NPN project, which is also a citizen science project, which means people collect the data, and that data is used to understand this change throughout the continent. And it's very reliable. You see, I mean, we know this statement about climate change, which says the warmer parts of the world are getting warmer and the colder parts are getting colder, which means that the seasons in the colder parts will be delayed and the seasons will arrive sooner in the warmer parts, which is exactly what's visualized here. In the southern part, which is warmer compared to this northern region, the spring arrives 20 days early, and it arrives 20 days late in the northern part. So this stands true for the temperate regions, or the regions where seasonal changes are based only on the change in temperature. Another example that I spoke about earlier was the food chain that was studied in the Oxfordshire. And there, a bunch of scientists monitored when this tree called pedunculate oak sprout new leaves. And that happens in the beginning of spring. So when the new leaves arrive, these winter moth lay their eggs and their larvae come out and start feeding on these leaves. And when there is an abundance of winter moth larvae, this bird called great tit, it also begins its breeding season. It lays eggs, and the chicks come out, and they feed these larvae to the chicks. So now, if the tree is affected because of the changing seasons, which means if the leaves are arriving earlier than usual, and winter moth larvae rely on their traditional knowledge that say first week of April, it's an arbitrary date. So winter moth larvae traditionally know that first week of April will have the new leaves, but it's happening way before. And by the time first week of April arrives, there are no new leaves for it to feed on. So that's going to be very difficult for that generation of the winter moth larvae. So that happened for a while, but winter moth larvae, being a smaller, simpler organism, it adapted to this change of pedunculate oak putting out its leaves sooner, and both of them then became in sync. So if pedunculate oak puts out leaves sooner, even winter moth larvae is laying eggs earlier, and the larvae are coming out earlier. But then the bird is a complex organism, more complex than the larva for sure, than the winter moth, and it took some time to adjust to this sudden change in which the larvae are getting over, or they're just turning into moths before they can be fed to their chicks. So that also again led to a loss of a few generations of great tits, but eventually, even very recently, it was published that even the birds have adapted to this change. And now the whole food chain has shifted 3 weeks earlier. So they began with understanding how the pedunculate oak is changing, and then they studied these interactions with the larva and the bird, and that's how they realized it's a whole food chain. So to understand how the whole ecology or ecosystem is changing, we need to start from the trees, because that's where it all begins. So this is an example that tells us all of these important factors, including temperate trees and tropical trees follow similar life cycles, which means temperate trees also shed their leaves, put out new leaves, flowers, fruits, grow the leaves, then they grow old, and then again they're shed. So this cycle is followed also by most tropical trees. But the major difference between temperate trees and tropical trees is that The trees in temperate region like Japan or USA or even Oxfordshire in the UK, they are dependent only on temperature. So they react only to temperature change to change their phenology. But in case of tropical climates or countries like India, the trees are sensitive to not just temperature but precipitation, day length, and other factors such as in which community they belong to, rather which other trees are growing around them, which species the particular tree belongs to, which population it belongs to, and also which kind of forest or which geographical region it's growing in. So same tree in different kinds of forests will show a different pattern of flowering and fruiting and its whole annual cycle basically. Moreover, temperate trees have strictly annual cycles. They will flower once a year, fruit once a year, shed leaves once a year. But that's not the case for all tropical trees in India. Some of them might flower once a year, some of them might have twice, two flowering cycles. Some of them even may keep flowering throughout the year or flower suddenly, like without following any pattern. So that makes studying and monitoring tropical trees difficult, but it's also very important because tropical countries are so rich with biodiversity. So we need to know what is the future of climate change impact and how it's going to affect our trees and then eventually the whole ecosystem that they support. And even human lives are very very dependent on trees, directly as well as indirectly. So to understand how all of this is going to affect us, I think, and to also understand the impact of climate change in tropical setting like in India, we need to begin doing something like the Japan did or USA did or the people in UK did with their penicillin example. And we're not very far from doing this already. Like I mentioned before, people earlier used to rely on trees when they start flowering, when they start fruiting, to know what part of the year is going on or when to celebrate which festivals. For example, the new year is marked by new leaves and flowers in various states in India, or Holi or the spring festival or harvest festivals in central India are started or they're kicked off for the year when the mahua tree starts flowering or the palash tree starts flowering. And the lal buranch or the rhododendron trees in the Himalayan region, that marks the starting of spring, and then they also begin all their festivities and other activities of cultural importance according to these trees. So we already monitor and depend and use trees and their phenology to understand all of these things that happen around us. And what we really need now is to only document it in one place in a scientific manner, so that this data can be used to be analyzed and to find out what's really happening because of climate change. So we started this project called Season Watch about 10 years ago, and it was taken up by one collaborator that we still work with from Kerala. And people in Kerala, they use this flower called Kanikuna or the Cassia fistula flowers for celebrating a New Year festival called Vishu. And people have been noticing that there is some anomaly in the flowering period of Cassia fistula. So they were encouraged to add the observations on Canicuna trees around them, and they did so with season one. So when we had enough data, what we did was plot the findings or the data that people had uploaded, and this is what we found out. The red line indicates the day of Vishu, and the graph indicates flowering trend of Kanikuna trees in Kerala or throughout Kerala. So here you see this peak is happening before Kanikuna, which is what people have been observing, that there are no Cassia fistula flowers during Vishu, which is really weird. People have been doing this for many, many years, for generations together. But suddenly, for the past few years, there are no flowers. And it's so bad in some places that people had to buy plastic flowers to celebrate or to use for decoration of the arrangement that they do for Vishu. And this data that they collected actually support their findings or their observations or their experiences basically. So this is what can be found out in also other parts of the country. And right now, if you see, Kanikona is not just blooming in summers. We should have gone to complete zero and then start again during summer, and then peak during Vishu, and then again go back. But that's not happening. Kanikana is also flowering throughout the year. So that is not the case everywhere in India again. So this is why what I meant by all the comparisons that we did with the temperate regions and the data from India. So what we need right now is to collect as much data as possible on specific species that follow a fixed seasonal pattern or are completely aseasonal, and then to compare what is happening throughout the country, and then also to understand which all factors are affecting these patterns. And that's why season watch comes in picture. And because we're talking about pan India, we cannot rely on a few people that just work with the project or are scientifically inclined or are scientists themselves to collect this data. So we have found this very simple way of noting when the trees are flowering and fruiting, have new leaves or have shed their old leaves, and that data can be used to understand the trend throughout the year, and then how it is changing through different years, and then that will tell us what climate change impact looks like. So coming to how to put this data on the platform called Season Watch, we use two ways. One is the application and one is also the website. You can use either. We have an Android app for now. We do not have an iOS app. So if you use an iPhone, please log in to the website directly and register yourself. So you will be a citizen scientist with Season Watch. And just like how you have an iNat ID or an eBird ID, you'll also have a Season Watch ID, and you'll be putting your tree observations on this platform. Then like I mentioned earlier, we have selected 170 tree species across India, and they can be observed in terms of their flower, fruit, and leaf patterns. And what we need to remember is to monitor adult trees that are more than 5 to 6 years of age, which have a particular girth or height. And these adult trees that actively bear flowers and fruits is what we want to monitor, because otherwise it will just be leaf cycle through the season and it's not very reliable. We know that leaves can be shed, or they can be affected by various other factors rather than seasons. So we want trees that produce flowers and fruits, which is a more reliable seasonal characteristic that trees have. And we also need to observe as many individuals of a species as possible. Ideally, 30 individuals of a species gives us a good reliable data from a region. So let's also focus on or try to monitor as many individuals as possible of a species that you've chosen to um, add data on. Secondly, you can add your observations in two ways. One is regular observations, wherein you put your species, you put your location, because location is going to be used to get the weather data. Then you register the tree, just like you created an account for yourself. You also create an account or a space for the tree that you want to observe again and again, because you don't want to be putting the location and the species every time you go and observe the tree. So you can just put a nickname for the tree so that you remember which particular individual you're observing. Children from Kerala have also given their own nicknames to their trees, which also really brings them closer to the tree, and they feel what the tree is feeling, and they have this beautiful connection with them. So you can give any nickname that connects you with the tree and that makes you helps you remember which individual you're monitoring. And other parameters like the location of the tree, whether it's in a garden or a park or in a society or on a roadside or forest or campus. And more importantly, height and girth, which will ensure that we're monitoring an adult tree and it's not very too young to bear flowers and fruits. So once this information is given, you will be prompted to check that information, and then finally once you save that, your tree is registered, and you just have to tap on that, and every week that you want to observe the tree, then you go to that tree's ID, and then you add the phenological observation. We'll come to how to add this whole data a bit later. So this is regular observation, wherein you register a tree and then you visit it on the same day, preferably same time, every week, and add your data. At least two observation per month is a really good data. It's good enough data actually, and every week of the month would be amazing. If you cannot do this on a weekly basis, you can also do one-time observations, which are called casual observations, wherein you only put in the species the location and the phenological observation. So you need not visit this tree again to put your data. This is one time observation only. So these are the two ways in which you can add your data. And now how to or what to input is basically the different stages of leaves, flowers, and fruits that we can see on trees. For example, fresh leaves, mature leaves, where the leaves have completely grown and turned darker green, and dry, wherein they are done with their job, they're ready to retire, and they turn yellow or eventually brown and they fall off. So before they fall off, while they're on the tree, if you see any yellow leaves, that's what you are going to observe and note down. Stages of flowers include buds, flower buds, and open flowers. And those of fruits include unripe fruit, which are generally smaller in size, green in color, and ripe fruits, which are ready to be eaten by various organisms, and are usually colorful and sweet and have a good smell also, mostly. And there are some types of fruits which do not have any nectar, so they are dry basically. And what they do is to shed out the seeds inside them, they naturally open. So this dehisced or open stage is also observable on some of the species that we can monitor. So what we need to do is to look at the canopy of the tree, because that's where all of these stages are present, and that's where all the seasonal changes are happening. Then we divide this canopy in three parts, and we see in how many of these parts these stages that we're going to observe are present. If they're absent or present in none of these three parts, you put your data as none. If they're in one of the three parts, any one of the three parts, you put few. If they're in two or all three parts, you put in many. Now, for example, if your phenophase, or these stages are called phenophases, and the study of these cyclic patterns and changes in an organism is called phenology. So, what SeasonWatch does is understand or monitor the tree phenology. So if your phenophase is present in one small leaf here, one young leaf here, and one young leaf here, so technically there are only three young leaves, but since they're distributed in all three parts of your canopy, your observation will still be many. So it's not about how abundant or how many the stages are, but how evenly or how they're distributed in the canopy. So that is one thing to remember when you put in your observations. So this is clear. Let's try one example, and I'm going to monitor this tree that was near my house. It's a very bad way to do it. You should never do phenological observations from a picture. But because we do not have the luxury of meeting in person and doing a tree walk and then learning how to use the app, this is what we have to make do with. So this is a Canicona or Cassia fistula tree. I have put in my species. I have put in the location of the species of this individual, and I've also added the observation date, because that is going to be connected with the weather data that we will be using to analyze the data later on. So our species is done, location has been put in, and observation date has been put in. So you can, if you have any observations that you've made previously, many years before, say, you can also backdate or use an older date to put your observations. So let's begin by looking at the canopy and divide it in three different parts. So this is how the tree looks now in my head. And then I start observing all these phenophases. I begin with fresh leaves. Like I said, picture is a really bad way of doing it, but I hope you can see one light green leaf here and one light green leaf here. Now, even I cannot see it in the photograph, but because I was standing in front of the tree, I know that there are some young leaves on the tree. So because they're in two of the three parts, I make my observation many. Then looking at the next phenophase, which is mature leaves. Mature leaves are these fully grown functional leaves, and they're in all three parts of the canopy. So again, I put my observation as many. Again, third phenophase is dying leaves or dry yellow leaves. I see one here, just near this arrow, and one here or here. Yeah, this is the dry leaves. So again, because they're present in two of the three parts, again just one leaf in both parts, but they're present in two parts of the canopy. So my observation will be many. Now coming to the flowers, there are no, you see the prominent yellow of flowers in this canopy. There are no buds, so I put none. And there are no open flowers either, so I put none for the open flower phenophase as well. Coming to the fruits, you see there are a lot of these young green colored pods hanging from the tree, and the arrow indicates one brown pod, which is the ripe pod that I saw in the tree. So unripe fruit is the phenophase that I'm observing, and it's present in all three parts of the canopy, so I put many. And ripe is present in just one part of the canopy, so I put few. Yeah, next is optionally, it's this part and this part are optional. Everything else has to be put in. So I can also look for any animals that are interacting with the tree, and I can tick the boxes that apply. For example, this particular tree and many other Cassia trees around this tree have a lot of these leaf cutter bees visiting the tree, and you see these half circles cut in the leaves. So I know that bees visit, and you can see them even if there is no flowering. So in that case, when if I see these bees humming, or even the signs of caterpillars or bees that have cut into the leaves, I can tick mark them in these boxes. You can also observe butterflies or birds or squirrels while you're making the observation. If you see any of these organisms on the tree, then you can tick those in as well. And then you can also add some notes about the tree. For example, this tree was just behind a vegetable shop, and there's a construction happening just in front of this tree, and I'm very scared that they would cut off this tree. So anything, any such observations, or maybe disease or any use that people might be making, if you get to interact with the locals and they tell you that this tree has been here for so time, or we use it like that, any note about the tree that you would like to add to your data, you can type it here. And finally save to give or upload your observation on the SeasonWatch database. So this is how you put in your observations. It's very simple, and once you get used to the whole procedure, it takes hardly a minute per tree to make the observations. So go out and try this out yourselves, and I hope you enjoy doing this activity as much as I do. We also have different networks that we have built. This is the newest network that we're trying to build, which is called Campus Phenology Network, and we really want college students especially to engage with the project, because this gives a really nice opportunity to understand how scientific data is collected, analyzed, and what the outputs look like. And so if you are residing in a campus, or you know a staff that works in colleges or universities, or are you, if you're a student, do scan this QR. You can do it right now as well, and fill in the form, and you can register with this network. It involves a lot of exciting activities, like there'll be a training session in April, I think. Then, sorry, in March, and then you will also have one workshop that tells you how to analyze the data, and you will basically be in touch with campuses that have registered with this network, and you can compare your data, you can exchange the data, and you can also make a nice annual project about the data that you've collected. So something to remember when engaging with this network is to have at least 30 individuals of the species that you choose to observe within the campus, because that will give you a very foolproof and complete data. This can be analyzed, and what results you get will be very reliable for that region, for that species. So try to do that. And the other information can be found out on SeasonWatch website in the updates in the CPN or Campus Phenology Network page. And it also has an added feature of monitoring weather data, so that you are self-reliant when it comes to the weather data that will be correlated with the phenological data that you will collect on your trees. So this is one network that we have. And we also have the India Tree Walks network, where if you are a tree walk resource person and you would like to learn from other resource people, or conduct tree walks yourself, please register. Again, you can scan the QR code and be a part of this network. We stay in touch via a WhatsApp group, and people are very active there. They put in information about trees, they put pictures for other experts to identify the trees, and also they share when they have organized a tree walk, so we can promote it and more people can join. The idea behind this network is to make tree walks as mainstream as bird walks are, or bird counts are, And we also hope to do these coordinated tree walks or a tree festival throughout India, like how the Great Backyard Bird Count so famously and beautifully happens in the country and also worldwide. So we really hope that you would like to contribute and be a part of this network as well. And finally, we realize that when you want to monitor trees or engage with them, identifying them is the first obstacle that we face. So Season Watch has produced some resources that can help you do that. One is this pocket guide that I have right here. This has a list of 35 trees that you can see in this poster as well. I'll put the links to ordering the pocket guide, which is just 35 rupees. And the poster can be downloaded for free. Or if you work with students and people, or you conduct tree walks or are a nature educator, we can also sorry, not email, post you the prints of these posters, and you can use them in your outreach or your sessions. And there are also a lot of beautiful books and websites that you can follow. You can take maybe a screenshot of this page, or I'll also send you this information in the chat box later on. But these are really good books, and this website, flowersofIndia.net, is pretty reliable when it comes to identifying your trees or getting more information about the trees, especially if you want to know the common names, vernacular names, and different Indian languages of the trees around you. And INAT, I'm sure most of you know, it's also a citizen science platform wherein you can put your pictures, and the experts all around the world will identify them for you. It does take some time, but you definitely get a good identification, and also you are contributing to biodiversity documentation, and this data is open to use and will be very, very helpful for people who are working on different species. So both of these are really good platforms to use to engage with plants. And finally, Season Watch is always there if you want to know more about trees, share your tree stories, learn more about trees through our posts that we make, and also simply ask any questions you may have about using the app or using the website or getting your own data and so on. And we also are very open to collaborating with different organizations that work in nature education, work with students, work with children, work with different communities, and want to find ways of interacting or getting your audience connected with trees. We would be very glad to collaborate and see how we can work together. These are our collaborators that we currently have. And with all of this information, I think I've told most about Season Watch. And I'll stop here and open the platform for question and answers. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. That was just very, very informative. And I thought I knew a lot about Season Watch, but I also learned a lot from what you just explained. And I think even some basic things about, abundance versus evenness of fruits and leaves in the trees. I think that's that kind of information and nuance was so important to have. And I really love how you observe trees very differently from how you would observe birds or how you would observe some other taxa and biodiversity. And it's
Yeah.
really nice that Season Watch has created a platform where you can do justice to the stillness and the beauty of trees, and also just appreciate how dynamic they can be even if they're not moving around all the time.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that. I think we all learned a whole lot. The chat box is still open. So if any of you have questions for Sayee before we close for the day, please feel free to type in your questions, comments into the chat box. And, we have another 5 or 10 minutes. We can definitely address some of them. And maybe while people are thinking and processing, I think, I have a couple of questions so we can
Yeah,
get you
sure.
started.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you've picked 170 species right now, and those are the ones that are actively being monitored.
Right.
So can you tell us a bit more about how those species were selected? Were there any particular criteria? Was it something that came from you, or was it something that perhaps was crowdsourced?
It's a bit of both, honestly. I mean, we wanted the goal was to get a lot of data, so the trees had to be ones that people know and are very widely distributed across India. So we actually started with very simple and usual common species like mango, tamarind, guava. Indian laburnum or Cassia fistula and so on. And then when we started reaching out to more people and different states also started participating in them, they started coming up with things like these trees are not found or they're not as common in our state. Or we also wanted to have data from the forest, and these trees are not found in the forest very commonly. So then people started suggesting species that they would like to monitor, and then we started adding species on the promise that they would monitor at least 30 individuals of that species. And that's how we have reached 170 species now. And we still get inputs on some more trees that should be added and that would like to be monitored. So yeah, so it's a bit of both. We also used a bit of our experience, and people also have been suggesting the species. And all of these species are essentially seasonal. They follow very strict seasonal patterns. They have a lot of cultural significance, economic importance, and they're also very easy to identify, basically, or are commonly found in most kinds of landscapes. So that was these are the different parameters that we looked at when adding species.
Oh, that's very interesting, and also such a nice, well-rounded way of doing it. It's really great. I think it also probably helps users to already have a list of plants to kind of select from.
Mhm.
And so, do you also have the opportunity when you're using the app or the website to learn a little more about each species that you are observing? Does it come along with some of those resources embedded, or do you have to you look at resources outside of the app as well?
We do have very minimal information about the trees, especially some important ID features that may help you finalize or make sure that you're observing this very species. But of course, we share a lot of other resources that might give you more information. For example, if you go to the app and let me just go back and see if we can see that here. There's an eye symbol in front of each species on the app, and if you tap on that, then here, so this
Hmm.
symbol tells you more information about each species that we're monitoring, but it's not like all encompassing, and a lot of things are missing in it. But you can, like I shared the other resources,
Yeah.
Flowers of India especially is a very good website to get more information about these trees.
Super. Thanks so much. We've
Thank you
got a
so
couple of questions that have come in, and of course, a comment that says that the talk was really great and Season Watch is a wonderful initiative.
much.
We have a question from Jayant, and he says, you've spoken about Cassia fistula's flowering shifting earlier. What are other sorts of findings that have been reported through Season Watch?
Honestly, I would love a lot of information to come out from the data that we have currently, but it's not enough. And you remember seeing a map that I showed you earlier? It was from Kerala, and that's the whole state is filled with these dots of observation. So whatever we say right now about the trees or the data that we have will apply very well only to Kerala. So we're waiting for data to come
Right.
from most of the country to make very foolproof observations. But we've also come up with one popular article about mango, about how mango pattern changed drastically because of one erratic monsoon year. And we have that on our website if you would like to read that. I'll try to share the link in the chat box immediately. But yeah, these are the two things that we've come out. And so right now we're focusing a lot on making people know about the project and encouraging them to participate and add data so that we can actually come up with a lot more data. And right now also we're working on analyzing the data that we already have, and also understanding the different parameters that play a huge role other than just weather in these findings or these phenological patterns. And we will be out with this information soon.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. There's another question from Sharan asking regarding CPN from April 23 to March 24. What if the campus doesn't have 30 individuals of a species?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So 13 users is like a cap. If you have that, then you can use your own data to understand what's happening inside your campus. But if not, you can use other data that comes from that state at least, and then analyze your data. So 30 gives you a good statistically significant data, I would say. But if you don't have that, then you can use other data that people have uploaded on the website or on the database basically. It's okay if you start with a few species also. Like, please don't let this parameter hold you back from participating in the network.
Right. Okay, we have one question which probably is hard for you to answer, but it says, which came first, climate change or destruction of trees?
I think destruction of trees came first, and that's what fueled climate change and made it grow so much. But
Right.
I am sure this
But
is.
yeah, it's yes.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying that I mean, all the more reason to monitor things more closely, since they are clearly connected and are influencing each other.
Yes, very true.
So I think that when we come to the close of the session, and it's been so informative. And since you have this map on the screen, I think one last thing I'd like to ask you guys is, clearly you've had an amazing response from Kerala, and it's allowing you to tell us these stories about the trees around us, and it's also helping us understand our seasons and our lives a lot better. So, what has worked in Kerala, which we need to kind of do right, and in other states of the country?
Right. I think the reason, so most data that Kerala inputs is from the schools. The teachers and students are super enthusiastic and very dedicated, and they keep adding data very, very judiciously and regularly. And I think Mathrubhumi Seed, our collaborator from Kerala, is the reason behind it. And also our coordinator from Kerala, Nizar, he has done a spectacular job of staying in touch with the teachers, keeping them encouraged, doing
Mm-hmm.
these regular outreach sessions, trainings that he does for the teachers and the students. And teachers have also really connected with the project, and they also encourage their children to participate in the project. And Mathrubhumi Seed, because it comes from the Mathrubhumi Media House, it has really good reach, and they're also very good at encouraging government schools from all the districts in Kerala to participate. And they have they have an array of nature related activities that these schools follow. So that's what got Kerala really nicely represented or encouraged to participate in Season Watch. Unfortunately, we have not found any such collaborator in other states so far, but we're really holding on to that hope that someday we'll find something as omnipresent in the state as Mathrubhumi Seed, and then it works out for other states as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. And it's so great to know that right from childhood, people are getting this excited about trees. And
Yes.
even the pictures you currently have up on the screen are just so endearing and lovely to see. So,
Yeah.
big kudos for doing such a great job in Kerala, and I really hope it spreads. And I hope everyone who participated today and joined us, wants to go and register immediately as a citizen scientist with Season Watch and start helping contribute to this kind of data. And of course, very very big thank you to you, Sayee, for doing this, and also a big thank you for everyone, for sharing their memories, thoughts, interacting with us in the first half of this webinar, especially. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishika. Sorry, I was just looking at some more questions in the chat box. Can you please get in touch
Mm-hmm.
on maybe Instagram or any other platform that I just showed in the end of the slides, and we can talk more about
Yes.
this. I'll just display that slide once more. Yeah, here it is. All right. So I hope you all stay in touch with us on these platforms, and also start adding your trees on Season Watch.
Great. Thanks so much for all of the resources as well. And thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you soon, and you can also keep in touch and stay tuned to CWS's social media to check in for more webinars like this. We typically do 1 or 2 a month, and keep in touch, and happy citizen sciencing.